Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me in the locker room this afternoon. I'm Alan Locher. Days of Our Lives alum Thaao Penghlis is here today to tell us about his latest project, Penghlis's Lost Treasures, a thrilling detective story style exploration of Greece's greatest contribution to the world's literature, the poet Homer. Thaao played two look-alike villains, Count Tony DiMera and his impersonator, Andre DiMera, for over 40 years on Days of Our Lives. In addition to his roles on Days, he played Victor Cassidine on General Hospital and Micah DeAngelis on Santa Barbara. He is also well known for his starring role in the primetime reboot of the Mission Impossible series. The Australian-born star has authored the memoir Places, The Journey of My Days, My Lives, and the cookbook Seducing Celebrities One Meal at a Time. Today, you'll hear how growing up in Sydney, Australia, Thaao always dreamed of becoming an archaeologist, dreaming of one day unlocking the secrets of the history of his Greek ancestors. Thaao takes us on his 20-year journey, now playing the guide with his new podcast series. Please help me welcome to the locker room, Thaao Penghlis. Hey, Thaao.
Hello.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Congrats on the new podcast.
Yes, that took me a long time because it's very difficult to do something else when you're doing a daytime serial. It's just, especially when you can do 11 shows in 1 week. So it's
I can't imagine the difference of when you started on Days doing 5 a week and now 11 in a week.
Yeah, it's a bit of a miracle actually for those of us who have expanded our muscle. I mean, it's taken 40 years to get there. But
before we dive in, I know you during COVID you were diagnosed with cancer. How are you feeling?
Oh, doctor thought I was. I remember walking into it. It was, "Hello, son," and I thought, "Well, I'm older than you." But okay. He said, "You, I have to say, are doing extraordinarily well." I think because I've never been sick, and also I think all the years that because of the pressures of daytime, I looked after myself with a lot of broths and diets and exercise, and also the travel that I would do, which also helped my mind remain healthy and not having breakdowns, and with all the kind of parts I had to play. The Andre character was very complicated and much more than Tony. And through all those years, he's, I say, it's curiosity through the years that kept my soul and my myself healthy. And so I overcame the cancer. I'm in the clear. I got it in time, but still, I lost 50 pounds. In many ways, the fact that we had COVID and we were shut down for a long time was when I was going through it. So nobody at the studio knew anything. And I remember going to work one day after all that, putting back the weight, and my producer said to me, "Oh, you're looking well." And I thought, oh, if they only knew what it was like. So at least this time, when I hear the word cancer and people going through it, I just did a talk show called Lifestyles and talked about it. It's not an easy thing to overcome because it really hits you hard. It hits you hard physically and how you look. It hits you with the energy. So in many ways, I spent 6 months in bed, but I had a great support system. So the investment I made in friends as well through the years with
paid
all
off.
the dinners paid off. Yeah.
Paid off.
Yeah.
Is there a piece of advice that you would give somebody if they were going through this or got a diagnosis today?
Well, I think it's very important. Women go check every year because my mother died of cancer and my sisters had it, breast cancer, and they check it out every year. I think the important thing is make sure those people around you, the way they love you, the way they take care of you, the meaning for them in friendship and what you stand for in their lives. And so that support system is earned. It's not something you just suddenly discover. So, if your friends, you must take care of them like they're your children as well. So part of it is the way you love. And I thought it came back to me well. But I would say don't look at it as something that was given to you in this life as a finito in your existence. Have a look at what's still what is still part of your dream, and what makes you curious about things, and so that the cancer only becomes part of the obstacles that you have to overcome. It's not it doesn't have to be deadly. So you just keep, it's a lesson, and it's something that you brought in to understand about yourself. So
part of your journey.
Part of the journey, but also not to be a victim of it. People play the victim. They love to do it. I mean, look at our politics today. It's full of victims. And so for me, you're much more heroic if you stand up and say, no, this is not good enough in my life. So get out of my body. And so it's very important to understand the kind of body you brought in, and how you feed it, and how how kind you are to it. And through exercise as well. I mean, it's all part of the package. But in the end, now that I look back on it, I thought, I always remember a phrase in a movie called Marie Antoinette, and she says to her lover, but you did it well. And I always look at that it was well done. And, the travel also gave me scope. You can't just live in your small quarter sitting on the couch judging from what you see on television or you hear on radio, or what you hear from people who are against your thoughts. So, don't be around losers. I think that's important. Be around people who really are getting a great grip and love living.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Well, take me back to Australia. Where did the love of archaeology first begin?
I think it's about buried treasures. I used to love the idea of going to Disneyland to the Pirates of the Caribbean. I think that's I think that's what always got me going. I thought, oh my God, imagine finding all those jewels and those crowns and swords and all that. So I knew a lot about ancient history because it was part of the curriculum at the school I was at. But the first journey I took was outside of Australia, was into Mexico. And I went to the Teotihuacan pyramids and saw what they were like. And then I went to New York and I studied there. But somehow I thought, just like Henrik Schliemann, who discovered Troy and Mycenae and put Homer's books, the Iliad and the Odyssey, on the map, that all these myths were really people who lived, heroes who lived, warriors who lived. And so when I went to Greece, the two things I wanted to do in my life was to have the pyramids at my feet and looking at them in there with nothing in front of me, just the pyramids. And the other was the Parthenon on the Acropolis in Greece. So when I went to Egypt first at 26, I remember at 1 o'clock in the morning, I went and saw those pyramids at night with the full moon. And it was just unbelievable because you don't want to shortchange it. You don't want to see it at a distance and it's peeking throughout modern culture. You want to see it in its entirety and how it was. And the same thing I did with the Acropolis and that beautiful piece of architecture that has had an enormous history and how they've kept it going and saving it from past warriors who came into the country and, try to desecrate it. So, the archaeology to me is about keeping the memories of the past present.
Interesting. Well, I've seen, the Acropolis at night, and that is just a stunning view when it's lit up.
Yes.
Stunning.
Yeah.
Lost Treasures, you grew up in Sydney, but are the child of Greek immigrants. And Lost Treasures is a detective story exploration of Homer. When were you first introduced to Homer, and what was it about him or his poems that set you out on that adventure to learn more?
Well, I remember when I was given both books as a gift, and I looked at them and I thought, oh my God, I have to read all of this. The longest poems in the world. But what was important really was, what was the history of these stories that have kept going through these centuries, and how were they to become the cradle of Western culture? I was saying on another talk show, which I had that kind of cog at that moment, that, Homer's stories and the way they've been described is like watching a series that we do today. So you see how something from the 8th century BC, during the Illiterate Age, has brought forth here at this time in the 21st century, where we are making series constantly, novellas, days of our lives, it's in serial form. So how do you tell a story? And because there was an illiterate age, the orators, they were the gods of the past, who would tell the stories of how the other gods influenced their lives. And so they made it very dramatic in cafes, and they were the entertainers of the ancient world. Even when I was going to Troy, I remember stopping on the way. It was an 8-hour drive from Istanbul to Hizalik. And when I would stop at a cafe, and it was all men smoking profusely with their cup of coffee, listening to a guitar or an instrument being played while he told them the stories of their great warriors. And the fact that I thought to myself, oh my God, I'm a modern man here walking the ancient earth, listening to stories of the past during a time that was an illiterate age. And it wasn't until the 6th century BC that suddenly the writing began, and these stories were being told that way. Now, did Homer write all these stories? Some say that because he was blind as well, I think he became blind in his late 20s, but what he was able to do is tell a story that took place in the 13th century BC, which was the War of Troy the War of Greece from a place called Mycenae to attacking Troy. 1,000 black sails, say, it went and attacked Hizalik. But when you go there today, there are 9 cities built on top of each other. Schliemann's mistake, who discovered the whole history because he believed the Iliad was a map to finding Troy. When you look at it, it's the ocean is 3 miles away. Whereas in the ancient world, that water, that ocean was closer to Troy itself. And so he thought, because Troy was the oldest city, he would cut right through those 9 cities until he came to the bottom and realized that he made a mistake. And we lost a lot of evidence. And so Troy was 7A, 6 or 7A. That was because it was a city that was burnt, and that's how he discovered it. But in those days, he was the father of archaeology. It was in its infancy in the 19th century, in the 1870s. And so, when you touch something that's that old, and you take a stone and you see something ancient beneath it, like a pottery shard, you realize, that this has been there waiting for you to discover it. So there's something about it, because then you find your own meaning to it. And so archaeology, as a long-winded way of saying all this, to get to the point, is why I'm interested.
And how did you get introduced? I mean, Lost Treasures is a 20-year journey, but you're following Heinrich. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Schliemann?
Heinrich Schliemann.
Schliemann. How did you become aware of him?
I went into, I read a book in the 70s about a gold treasure, and it was a great love story between Schliemann and his wife, Sophia. He was 46, she was 16. And because of his great wealth, and, he came from poverty, but because of his great wealth, he picked the bride because he wanted to have a Helen by his side. So he thought of himself as the Paris of the ancient world, and he would have Helen by his side discovering Troy. So he was a romanticist. But for me, it wasn't until I went to Greece one year, and I went to the archaeological museum that I go to every time I go, where a man had recognized me and put his arms around me. He was one of the workers there, and he said, "Oh my God, you've given us such pleasure." And this was about Mission Impossible. "What can I do for you?" I said, "I'd like to meet the Minister of Culture." And that's how it all started. I met the Minister of Culture. I said, "I want to see Schliemann's house. I want to also go through his documents that are at the DeAngelis library." So that all was set up. So after 60,000 documents, visiting his gravesite in Athens at Kolonos, and getting permission to enter a house that was totally closed. There was one old woman who was taking care of it. And when I went in, it was like I was walking through the 19th century. And all the stories I read about him, his entrances, his exits, the royal household that would pay homage to him, all the dignitaries from all around the world would come and visit this extraordinary man. And so, when you see those stories, there aren't too many men these days that you can say to yourself, "I'd like to be him." Even if we have great men around us, they're flawed because we criticize so often. We build things up and then we break them down. We try to find out as much as we can to disseminate these people. And so our history doesn't get a chance to breathe. And so I'm kind of sorry about that because, when you look at Biden, whatever you think of his politics or whatever, the fact that he's lived this long and has done things the way he's done and the kind of dignity the man still sustains, you can see that through his wife and his family. The love of a son who's going through such tragedy right now. But, he doesn't cover it up.
And his previous son.
And his previous son who died as a war hero. So, it's like, would you give the man a chance? But because we've got all these terrible, terrible people that are just knocking down everything that we're trying to build up. They're lacking, what it is too? It's their
heart. They're lacking heart. They're lacking empathy.
Yeah, and they don't understand. They don't offer anything in substitution. All they give you is criticism. And, that's why we have to be strong about our world. This is an amazing country. I've traveled all over the place. It's an amazing country. The freedoms we have, we take those things for granted. And our freedom to share what we think and how we feel about things. In a lot of countries, they throw you in prison, I know in Egypt, it's not easy to live there and China and some of the other countries, but oh my God, how many men through our history have built this country and women and made it an extraordinary country to live in. And just these last number of years, they've just taken that away. And
they're actually like, chipping away at our.
Yes, that's why I keep looking at the ancient heroes.
No.
Not to say that they weren't faulty, but there's something more romantic about
No one's perfect, but there's a way to do things. Absolutely.
Well, nasty. It's nasty.
It's very nasty.
We live in a very nasty society, and the trouble is the people who criticize are the losers. They can't build. A person who has a good observation about life and who sees life fully instead of half. Are people who have lost, who don't have the initiative to be great. The reason why history has remained is because there were incredible warriors that walked the earth, and even our Second World War, and we saw what the Brits did, what the Americans did, and the Allies. But today it's that's why I keep going into the past. I think it's a lot more attractive than what we have in the present.
Well, thank God, what everybody did today being D-Day,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I come from, two parents who were Holocaust survivors. So that thankfully they were, saved. Yeah.
I mean, when you look at those movies that they show you about the Holocaust, and people have the audacity to try to say that didn't happen, and it was only 80 years ago. We need to.
What is the point of that, of even saying something, or how about people saying the Sandy Hook didn't happen? That it's, it's.
Yeah. Well, they're couch travelers. Do you know what I mean? They don't explore and find out what life is
It's
about.
insane.
Yeah.
After all your exploration, what drove your desire to put this into Lost Treasures?
Well, after going through 9 books on Schliemann and going through 60,000 documents and traveled all those different areas, I decided there was a story to tell. And because I've done one-man shows, and as shy as I have been in my life, there's something about standing up in front of an audience and telling them a story. And how do you tell that story? Hopefully without too many bridges. You tell a story that is worthy of people's time, and something about how does it end? A lot of people talk, but there's no ending. They just keep going. Like one interview yesterday, the guy was going on and on and on talking. He was very intelligent, but it was all very scattered thoughts. And I asked him, was there a question there? And to me, that's what a storyteller does. He doesn't allow anyone to think there's a question until he's finished. And so storytelling is wonderful. And that realized that that's what ancient orators did. They would get up in front of an audience and tell them stories. That's what people on radios do. That's what we do when we, when we say things on and tell stories or read books, so that people can listen to them. These are all storytellers, and to me, it's so important to the world not to forget. Because Greece went through a terrible time for 350 years with the Turks, where they couldn't say anything. They couldn't get up and tell their stories. They couldn't talk about their heroes. They couldn't talk about their cultures. They had to borrow another culture, the invaders. And so once in 1821, when the Greeks finally were free, they had something to say. And so filmmaking is fantastic that way. And the Jews did that. I mean, that's what they did at the turn of the 20th century. They created filmmaking. And so, it's, for me, I think that's why I like to cook, because cooking is part of sitting down at a table, a watering hole, and telling a story and sharing stories, and people telling their versions of something. And there's humor, and there's sadness, and there's all those colors that are human, that people enjoy the evening and then go home and they had an event. So, to me, it's about creating an event.
Did you enjoy the process of putting it together?
You have to enjoy that. It's like cooking, You can't just say, "Oh, here's the food, eat it." You have to have enjoyed
the steps.
The whole preparation and
chopping.
Chopping. and then you say, "Oh my God, I forgot an ingredient or something," and you add another. But at the same time, it's all part of sharing, and it's all part of why. I don't know why people don't do that more often, why they don't invite each other to their homes. People have become, they've stayed separate. They haven't come they didn't walk together. They just separated, and they come to you and you share with them, but then they don't even call and say thank you, or, it's just amazing what's happened to the ignorance of this society. It's, they're missing out. There is something about sitting with your grandparents and thanking them for all the things that you're part of the reason of the family tree, that you're there. And
or asking questions of them to learn your story.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
regret not asking more questions. So I always tell people today, ask, sit down with your family and oh, we lost Thaao. Oh, there he is.
We lose.
There you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you hope people take away from listening to Lost Treasures?
That they went on an adventure. I mean, I did it. It took me 2 years to write it. There are 4 segments. Each are about 35 minutes each. They're great to listening when you're driving. But I acted out just like I saw it, because in every story I told, I was there. So it wasn't like I read a book and talked about the story. I actually sat there, sometimes even with a glass of champagne. I thought the
Why
celebration
not?
of it, celebration of it. And then the fourth one, which I really like a lot, are all the journeys and the obstacles that came across when you're journeying into dangerous territories.
I hope this isn't your last, because you seem like you would have many of these types of stories to share with people.
Well, I just wrote a biblical story, but then I'm afraid if I tell it, someone may steal the idea. I just think it'd be a great film. And so I've investigated, and part of it is the journey of the Holy Family whose escape into Egypt created the Coptic religion. And I went through that landscape for 2 weeks up and down the Nile. That was such an adventure, and it was, and going through primitive areas that haven't changed since BC, where a young kid is with a huge buffalo walking along the Nile, and I get out to take a picture and he starts screaming. The buffalo runs off. The kid starts screaming up the mountain and asking for help in Arabic, I heard, all because he thought I was going to kidnap him, because he's seen that on television. There's things you come across in your life that you're going, oh my God. And then I had to get the little boy with his father, and I gave him some money, and I apologized for creating that. I mean, I felt terrible that I created that fear and that, doubt because he'd seen it on TV. But there were a lot of wonderful stories of a kid who came to me in one of the areas, and he was 14, and he was working in a butcher shop, and I was there with my guide, and he came up to me because he could see I was a foreigner, and he said to me, please, would you take me out of here? I don't want to die here. And so, you feel for these people, because let's face it, one of the reasons for the podcast is I've been a mentor to some people over the years, just like I found my mentors. We need someone who knows more than we do and guide us, and then let us fly where we need to go. But mentoring is very important for those who are in their 20s searching for answers.
Absolutely. Who are some of your mentors, Thaao?
Well, Milton Cassidine was. I was with him for 40 years. He was the number one. I studied with him for 30 odd years. I was his assistant for 12 years, and 10 to 12 years it was. And then Sarah Adler certainly was a mentor of mine. And Robert Ellsworth, as much as I disliked him, he really, when I was in New York as a student at $75 a week, he made me study everything about Chinese art and English 18th century art, so that when a shipment came in, I was able to appraise it. And so those early years were really very important. So they were the mentors, and all that knowledge was never a waste, because I'm still using it today.
It's amazing. I love asking about people's mentors. Favorite place you've been? I mean, I don't know that you'll say one, but because you seem to love everywhere you go.
If I was to say, what do I miss the most? I miss a Greek island, sitting at a cafe in front of a ruin. That I love. I also miss Egypt. I love going to the monuments. The biggest outside museum in Luxor, Karnak Temple, built around the 14th century by a number of pharaohs, but it is the biggest open museum in the world. And to walk through it and seeing, going on a felucca along the Nile at 5 o'clock in the afternoon when you hear the minarets calling to prayer, all those sounds. And I remember going down to Aswan, and I went to this hotel where the writer of Death on the Nile, I'm trying to just what Agatha Christie, and I'm sitting there at that hotel at that point, and looking at all these feluccas sailing down, knowing that in this hotel in the 19th century, some of the greatest scholars, including, I think, later on, Menzies from Australia and some of the great leaders of Britain had encamped there. There's just something about the visual aspects that stay with you. And they would be the two main places that I would love to go again. So I am going to go next year. I've decided I'm going to go back to Egypt to see the new museum, and then go to Luxor and walk through the Sikh out into Petra, and to go to the Mount Nebo where Moses had finished his last days, and sit at the top where you can see Canaan and the Jordan River, and where the baptism took place, and Jerusalem, and crossing Sinai Desert and climbing Sinai, all were part of every year I would give myself a great adventure. And then I would come
think
back.
that should be all of our goals, shouldn't that? That should be all of our goals, to give ourselves a great adventure.
Yes, and then I would come back, and I would be fulfilled and rich in my mind and my spirit, and I couldn't wait to get back to work and take those lines and take them off the page and make it as exciting as possible. They were the days. A lot of things we're looking at that we did are now in the past. I don't care if they're still alive today. I was part of the golden age, or at the end of it. And, you see those great stars, from MGM and Fox, and they were incredible times. At least I got to witness.
They certainly were. Speaking of those lines, where did your love of acting begin?
I loved going to the movies when I was a kid. And when I came to America and someone said, "Oh, you should be an actor," and I thought, well, no, I don't think, what does an actor do? And I had no idea about, where Spencer Tracy would say, you walk up to your mark and you tell the truth. And I'd go, really? So then you look at somebody whose truth you're about to interpret and you're going, well, that doesn't sound right. So, writing has to inspire you as well. And if it doesn't, if it falls flat, then you have to find it within yourself how to make it exciting. But it was because of Vasily Lambrinos, who was in The Unsinkable Molly Brown with Debbie Reynolds, who came to me at a party, and he says, "You're Greek?" And I said, "Yes." He goes, "I was looking at you, and I thought, this Greek boy should be an actor." And he took me to a class, and that's how it all began. And I was just terrible. I mean, terrible, to the point where I was ready to give it up. And I thought, I'm not here. I'm really, my excuse here is because I wanted to get away from Australia and the Greeks there, but I couldn't go home a loser, because then they'd be pointing fingers saying, "I told you." And so
so you proved them wrong.
I did. And that's a lovely win.
It is.
To have people at that distance waiting for you to fail. But that's what happens in life. People don't, once you win, then they say, "Oh my God, it must have taken something, so therefore he or she must be good," But if you lose, then you're just like everybody else, because there's a lot of people in the wings, if you know what I mean. But those of us who go out front and tell the story with some validity and some enthusiasm, and raising the spirits of the people, the audience, there's nothing better than, I did a play at the Geffen Theatre with an actor, Victor Buono, and I remember he was upstaging me all the time. He used to pull faces behind my back. I was playing a man of God, and he was playing a bishop, and he tried to make it into a comedy when it was really a drama. And the play was written by the man who wrote Man of La Mancha. And I remember someone in the audience came backstage and said, "Be careful of him. He's making fun of you while you're having that God speech." And I said, "Oh my God, really?" So opening night, instead of doing it to the audience, I turned to him. And he was thrown because he couldn't do the big jokes he was doing behind me. And I did the speech of God to him. He dropped his scepter, and we were on an eight degree rake stage, and it rolled down. And he had to go and pick up his scepter because that was his power. And when he bent down, he couldn't pick it up. He couldn't get up because he was so heavy. And so he struggled to pick it up. And I said, "Well, can I help you, sire?" And he goes, "No." And he picks it up and he starts screaming at me dialogue that wasn't even in the play. He was so furious. He went and sat on his throne. He starts screaming the lines now, which would never happen before. I decide to walk off the bloody stage because I said, "Who the hell do you think you are?" So he calls me back and I come, and the amount of clashes that we had and this exciting piece of theater that the audience all stood up at the end of it and screamed with applause. So
that is
that's
amazing.
That is that is, you know, some of the things that I've experienced that made it really worthwhile to say
I
that.
love that. Well, 43 years ago, you made your debut as Victor Cassidine on General Hospital. And in your book, you said Gloria Monty was responsible for bringing you on, and there was a strike, and you needed that job.
Right. I had done Altered States. I thought I was going to, because it was my third film, and I thought it was a real breakthrough for me. And I got some really nice reviews. And then the strike came that lasted 9 months. And of course, the power of that film fizzled because there just wasn't any publicity or we couldn't work. So the only thing that was open was daytime. And I thought at the time was a poor substitute after working with Ken Russell and Bill Hurt. And so I went in and I didn't get the first audition, but they realized the actor they chose as the brother was not a strong actor. And Gloria Monty remembered my audition, and she liked the fact that I had a different kind of accent. So I brought in the British sounding accent in daytime, whereas before it was soap operas were just about, for American audiences, it wasn't about any Brits or anything. So she always thought ahead of the game. She had great insights, and she called me in and she says, "I think we could use you as the stronger brother," and that we had the older brother played by John Colicos. And I remember working with Tony Geary, who was a great pleasure to work with. And I really enjoyed it. It was 3 months of bliss, but the only thing was my first, second, and third day, they gave me so much dialogue. I remember throwing the scripts across the room. I said, "Who in the hell is going to remember all this dialogue?" But she had perseverance with me. She said, "Darling, I know where you're going. You're going to have a career, so I'm staying with you." And so she did. And even Scorpio, what's his name? Guy who played Scorpio. Tristan Rogers, yeah. He grabbed me by the chest one day and pulled the hair off my chest while he held a machine gun, and she came screaming down at him, saying, "You have a gun. Why do you need to grab him by the chest?" And she said, "You see your name here?" She showed him the script. "All I got to do is break the pencil at your name, and it's gone. Finished. Over." She didn't care who you were. If you weren't playing the game properly, and she saw what the motive was behind it. See, I was Australian and he was Australian, so I don't think he was enjoying the fact.
Did you have any idea? I mean, you just said you really didn't like the amount of dialogue. Did you have any idea what daytime was like when you walked through those doors at first?
No.
Yeah.
No, and it was. I think it was the hard. If anybody said what was the hardest time, I would say that was when I had 30, 40 pages to learn the night before. And I didn't think it was possible. And then a wonderful producer came to me and she says, "Sweetheart, you see your script? let's just do it one scene at a time. Let's break it down one scene at a time. Scene one, scene two, and onwards. And she said, and when you do that, then you won't feel overwhelmed. So I got scene one out of the way, and then scene two out of the way, and that's how we did it. And so by that I learned. Plus, I was starting to exercise the muscle of memory, and I also worked with some wonderful actors on General Hospital, and they were very supportive. And also the fact that the story was the biggest story in the history of soap operas, and thousands and thousands of people would turn up, and so we were part of a glorious history. And then Liz Taylor came, which brought great respect to it.
Yeah.
And so, and then you saw a lot of, even Joan Crawford and a lot of the actors came on and did their stints. So,
and you said it felt like you were part of a cult because of how popular the show was back then.
oh my God, yes. Yeah, I mean, General Hospital, they used to have restaurants, pizza and General Hospital for $1.99, when you can watch and have a pizza and watch at a bar, that type of thing. But, even when I went to Chicago, I remember 18,000 people turned up, and within 6 weeks of playing the character. So, yeah, it was. And you'd go to the airport and they'd be chasing you. I mean, even when I went to England, I remember sitting down and a bus pulls up, screeches to a stop, and it's all these American schoolgirls. They all came running out screaming, Victor Cassidine, and I ran into the men's toilet to get away because I thought women are not going to come into a men's toilet. And you can imagine the Brits. All these girls ran into the men's toilet, screaming, following me in, while some of them were urinating at the stall. Just to see a Brit being caught up with these schoolgirls was just so indignant, and all that. But yes, it was, there was, you don't see that anymore. You may see it with rock stars and things like that, but you don't see it in daytime anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the audience has changed. When you look back on your time in Port Charles, was it a good experience?
It was fabulous. Sometimes you can't always see it while you're in it.
Right.
You have to come out of it to observe it. That's what writing does. It allows you to recall something of the past that you remember fondly, and some things perk up that you didn't think you'd ever remember, ideas of things or someone's conversation. Even Gloria Monty, when I was we were going over the plan on the boat for the Ice Princess, and I remember a director, and Tony Geary was standing there like a spy. He was a waiter inside the boat, and I remember saying, "Oh," and I was only there for a month, so I said, "Excuse me," to the director, "what is he doing in here? If we're talking about conquering the world, why would I have a servant in my quarters to hear it? Now, it may be great for story, but to my reality, that doesn't work." And he said, "I'm sorry, that's the way we're doing it." And she came out from the room where she was watching and came out. I remember the director putting his hands in front of his crotch as if she was about to cut his balls off, because that's how powerful she was. And she said, "He's absolutely right. Tony, get off the stage." And Tony jumps in the air with his fist up in the air and says, "Oh my God, we have an actor on board." So that's how I knew I landed, so that was...
I love that. But and then it was Pat Falcon Smith,
Yes,
who was the head writer of GH, and then she took you over to Days.
Yep, I know that Gloria was upset because I remember they did an interview, and the headline was "The One That Got Away," because she said, "Honey, out of all the 30 actors, we're bringing Victor back. I think the audience liked the character, and also because the way I sounded was different. People like things different. After a while, you want something. I mean, it's not Tristan Rogers. He had a great character, but he sounded really Australian. I never did. I didn't say, nice day to die. I didn't speak that way at all. So it when she
Well,
took me
speaking of
over.
Australia, Stacy just woke up and says, "Good early morning from Melbourne." Somebody's watching us right now from Melbourne. She just got up.
Oh, hello, Stacy. She's quite the trooper. She's quite very
quite a
supportive.
fan.
Yeah, she's very supportive, so it's always appreciated.
Yeah, that's
I'm
awesome.
sure that's going to wake her up.
How did that feel? That Pat wanted to take you to. I mean, that must have felt pretty damn good.
Well, we didn't have ethnic characters so much, and she had this idea when she was asked to come, and she was a wonderful writer. I think the best in daytime.
Oop.
And so she, when she called me over, she had this idea of, coming from the Cassidines to doing the DiMeras. So what I went from was a very powerful family to another powerful family. And it was interesting because they have, even though I was part of its birth in both shows, they are still going on. You still have Cassidines on General Hospital. You still have DiMeras on Day. I mean, but once Joe left, I don't know, something dissipated. It depends. Pat Falcon-Smith had a mind of the world. She really had insight into powerful men, and that's what she gave us.
Well, that must also feel good that the DiMeras are still part of the canvas over there. I mean, you brought that era into Salem.
Yes, it was interesting too. It was also a fashion statement because the Cassidines dressed very well, the DiMeras dressed very well, especially Joe and myself. But you saw what came out of it was Dynasty. Dynasty came out of that era, and it was all about fashion and story and wonderful characters, and just like we created on Days of Our Lives. So, in many ways, if things are done well and audience is interested, people pick those things up and create something else in their own and do their own version. So, yeah, it was. I just hate to look back at it, all of it, and realize how quickly it's all gone.
Mm.
There's nothing lasts long. You look at history and you see how great empires, and even though they last for years and years and years, hundreds of years, not too long anymore. But these days, we're lucky if something stays more than 5 years. We get over things really quickly because we have too many choices.
Now we do, for sure. Yeah.
And when I grew up, we had 3 choices: Disney Station, I Love Lucy, and some other show. And that's all we had. And now they say, people get bored, they can switch and find something else and just stay home.
Well, but you had a job for on and off for 40 years on that show. What was it like working with Joe?
The best. I got Joey's job.
Oh, wow.
When they said to me 6 months into the story they're going to bring a father figure for me, I said, there's an actor I'm working with in a workshop at Milton Casellas, and it's Joe Moscolo. So they called him in, and he was perfect for the part. I mean, one of the great iconic characters of daytime, and really very, very solid in his footing. He had that voice going for him. I was a contrast to him, so it was kind of nice to have somebody who was that kind of, he knew how to work an instrument. He had a voice that would just, with his scream in the morning about something, everybody shook. That's the power that Joe had. And so, but it never intimidated me. And that was the good thing, because the louder he got, the more intense I got. I went into his face, So with what I've been through, there aren't too many things that intimidate me. And I pick up things really fast about people, where they're coming from. whether they're there to share something with me or they want to throw me or they want to take something away to make me less. I get that up front really quickly these days. It's the same things that, the more you experience, the more you know.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've had obstacles in my life that could have put me either in prison or killed. And I survived those things. So when you see some of the characters you go up against and you see what they're coming from, because a lot of them come from ego. When you come from ego, you trip because it's hollow. And so that's what made Joe so great. Joe came from an instrument that was in the earth, and he was able to stand with such authority. And that's why he had that chest he did, and that's why the voice bellowed out. So I've been blessed.
I love how you describe that. The ego definitely gets in people's
Oh, yeah,
way.
you can hear it because it's hollow.
Yeah.
You can see when actors get, pompous about their self-importance, but, there's nothing, it's hollow. It's just nothing in there. And so, it's like a scarecrow.
Did you prefer Tony or Andre more?
Well, Tony was the first character, and of course I enjoyed him because I was able to elaborate on what I discovered in General Hospital. I was able to strut my stuff and be different to the other actors because I sounded and looked different. And I saw a few challenges come my way from not just the men, some of the women. But in the end, if you can stand up to them, they appreciate you because they realize there's something to valid, there's something to respect in front of them. And you have to be your own person. And I think in many ways, it's what my father was never able to do. Many ways, when I looked at it, his struggle in life, he never overcame. And I thought, well, that was the first generation in Australia. And my responsibility was to go beyond that. And I've also mentored my nephews, and they've turned out to be really great people because what they took from me was the best of what I had. And also, walking your talk and the way my home is and the way I cook and do things. Some people don't like my straightforwardness. They think in many ways, it's rude or arrogant. But, I like to nip things in the bud.
Why not? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cindy says, Thaao, wish you were still on days. You made it exciting, kept it fresh, and were one of the very best. Miss you a lot. All the best from Canada.
Thank you.
When they approached you that you would be playing both, was that exciting?
Scary. I thought, in that pace, how do you make something different? So Andre, I really got to love because it brought out of me the things I could get away with. And in life, you're going to be smacked, fired, or told off. So for me, it was, this is a chance where I'm getting paid. And I can be a real bad boy. I changed my voice. I went deeper, like when I did the clown. I dressed, Tony was the original, so I tried to dress like him and have his attitude, but he was a little bit sloppy. He would trip, maybe. I learned from those phony characters that I sometimes worked with and took that on as part of the elaborateness of Andre, and Andre always fell. Let's face it, he died a few times. I started
it is daytime. It is daytime.
Well, it wasn't then. It wasn't then. It was something, first. It was like I created the first doubles in daytime. Leanne, Honey, and I did the first bathtub sequence and the first shower sequence because everything was there so prim and proper. And, I was the kind of guy that they would say, well, don't zip her dress too far down because you'll see the crack of her backside. And I would take the zipper all the way down, and that's what I would do. No, it's about getting away with murder. And that's who Andre was.
You have said that Leanne made the biggest mark on you during your time on Days. Will you talk about working with her?
What do I say about Leanne? It's like a fairy tale. You know, she's from another time in her manners. You know, she had really, she was quite, if I said a lady, she was a lady. She didn't swear. She always was, she's well bred. She's educated, can get upset very quickly with me because I was the bad guy. She got upset with me recently because I snapped because she was they were so loud in the kitchen I couldn't even hear my conversation, and so I snap quickly, but I get over it quickly. I don't hold on to things. I don't have revenge. You know, I get that paid for on a show, not in real life, and so. You know, she was so beautiful, and she still is. She's got a manner about her that was different from somebody else, and that's why, in many ways, when we danced together, we came together. It was like we became one. And when I would get upset sometimes, because in my early days, um, I was sometimes impatient or scared that I wasn't going to do a good job at what I was being told to do. Sometimes I would get upset with the director because I felt his direction was boring and because it was by the numbers. And I'm going, you know, can we do something more than just this, you know? So they didn't like us. The pace is so fast. They didn't like when you stopped and questioned the director. It's as if, you know, whatever he said you did. And I didn't believe that. I believed that, why did I get all this training for? I have insight into things. Well, you know, even when he said to me, I want you to sit on the other side of the desk when your mother comes in and sit there with her and she'll sit on the other side. And I said, you don't interview mothers. You don't put your mother in front of a desk with you on the other side. That doesn't work. I said, it's your mother. If you're going to show the audience the differentiation between your relationships, then you've got to be honest in the way you treat them. And so he says, well, what would you suggest? And I said, I would like to take my mother and put my arm around her and take her to the couch and speak to her like her son with respect. But I'm not going to be sitting on the other side of a desk doing these scenes with my mother on the other side as if I was interviewing her. Things like that, you know. So Leanne would say to me, oh, Thaao, it's okay. Don't worry, darling. It's okay. So she would quiet me down, calm me down.
I love that.
And then I grew up.
I am rewatching Who's the Boss, and I came across you on there in season 3, and now Leanne in season 5. So funny. What are you most proud of from your time on Days?
Well, I think the roles I played that I got nominated for, I was proud of. Days didn't get much acknowledgement. You know, the thing about the Emmys is that even that has faded because, you know, the categories, especially in the writers and the shows, there's only 4. Actors are still got a number to compare with. But, you know, they set things up where, you know, if you've got a good actor going against another good actor from another show, the show, you know, it's all so political. So, but I remember The Clown. That was scary as hell, and so, but I was very proud of that show. Also proud of the black and white show we did that Calavati wrote when I was with Abigail, and that was shot in black and white, and I had already died, and I was her subconscious coming to consciousness and talking to her. That's I like. You know, they go so quickly you can't remember what you've done because we do so many, but some stand out. I suppose when you get nominated, there's a pause so that you do remember somehow something you did was well received. But the fact that I had such longevity, why I was brought back 7 times, something about me must have sustained with producers and with Ken Corday. It was a good character.
And with the fans.
Yes. I mean, the fans have been, they're funny. They're funny. The way they, like you if you open your shirt a little more. Why don't you not, why don't you not always wear suits? Wear something casual and show your chest, or, those types of things that they enjoy. Uh, yeah, I mean, I've like a lot of actors, who've got fans who like their physicality, they enjoy you. But God Almighty, if you keep repeating the same thing over and over, they'll get bored really fast. So you've got to
Oh,
keep ahead of them, and
for
also ahead
sure.
of and also ahead of the producers.
You also had a short role on Santa Barbara. Did you enjoy your time there?
That was 9 months with Kim Zimmer.
Oh, I didn't realize Kim is a friend of mine because we worked
Oh.
together on Guiding Light.
Oh, what a wonderful actress.
That must have been fun.
Yes, but I'll tell you one time,
She is a hoot.
I had to do a scene and she grabbed me by the nuts. Right? And I mean, she would do it a few times. And then one day we had a scene where she had to slap me. I've been slapped so many times. I don't know. That was the only thing. And for real.
Can you count?
Oh my! Well, this particular, there were 3 slaps, and each one they had to do a retake. And she slapped me like I saw stars. And I said to her, "You miss again, I'm gonna slap you right back." So you had to stand up to Kim, I think. But I enjoyed her. That's the first time I had to learn the tango. I did it with Kim, and that was great.
Oh, I'm going to look on YouTube. I hope I find scenes of the two of you. How fun.
Yeah, and there was Paul Rausch,
yeah.
Yes, I have to go to tell you something. He's gone now. Not a particularly great guy. He
was a tough guy. I worked for him at Guiding Light. He's a scary producer.
Well, he came to me and said, "Listen, I want you on our show. I've got this incredible love story we're going to shoot in Italy, and it's going to be with Kim Zimmer." I said, "Oh, really?" He says, "Yep, it's going to be a great long storyline." And I said, "Oh, okay." And at Lake Como. And I said, "Okay." So he seduced me into coming on the show. I wanted to take a break from daytime, but I had just been offered a mini series to go to Spain to do. I had just finished one with Omar Sharif, and I got along with the director and producer really well. And they always asked me, "Where did you get your training from?" Because I could do things in one take, and they weren't used to that. And I remember Paul Rausch, I came on and he said, "Well, we're going to be going soon to Italy." And then I waited and I waited. And then about a month later, I went to him and I said, "When are we going to Lake Como?" He goes, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, we're not doing it anymore. They scrapped the story." And then I realized I'd been had, that he had lied to me. So I never forgave him for that because I didn't trust him from then on. And then I went to him one time and I said, "Do you think we can get some better lighting in our scenes?" I said, "Because there's like too many shadows." And he says to me, "How dare you? We have Emmy award-winning lighting directors on my show." I said, "Not on my face, you don't." Well, he would talk to me for weeks after that.
Yeah, so, I could imagine. I definitely could imagine. Wow. Is there something you want to do next?
Well, I'm doing something. I can't talk about it right now, but I'm very excited with a new project.
Acting?
No, I don't want to do so much. I mean, doing a lot of writing. Yeah, the acting's good. I get tired of having to look good and presentable. After a while, you just want to go, "Oh, just let me alone. Let me get out of bed and just write something." Not to have to spend, in the mirror with makeup and hair and costumes. Let me just take the other side for a while. And so, yes, I've got that project. I've got my biblical story that I want to be made into a film. and I wrote something for Days of Our Lives. And then Albert Alar, who was very excited with the idea, was a whodunit, and I gave it to him, and he was so excited, and then he got fired. So I thought, well, why did I write this story? And then I thought, oh, not everything is a closed door is not always a closed door. You have to look for another door. And that's what I've done.
Oh, that's great. That's great. The fans were asking, are you truly done with soaps?
Daytime gave me so much. This home, I mean, I'll always thank Ken Corday and all the journeys I've taken. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I don't like it, the idea that it's over. But at this particular stage, I don't know. I'm still an actor, and I'm still. The thing is, I'm the best I've ever been because of all the experiences I've had, and the writing, because the writing gives muscle to the language, and when you utter language now, it's stronger. It has, I always loved the way Peter O'Toole, Paul Schofield, Obama, when they speak and they throw a line out and they wait till it lands. They're not in a rush to get to the next line because there's something in the way this line lands that gives it gravitas, that allows the audience to grasp something very important about that moment. So those are the things that I love exploring now, but I don't think it's in daytime. I don't think they allow you that much time to explore. It's about, moving on, moving on.
It's very fast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, meditation has played a role in your life for 40-something years.
Yeah.
Tell us about the role it has played.
Well, when Leanne used to pat me on the back and tell me it's okay, I don't have to have that anymore. I come out of meditation that way. You know what I mean? That's why I said I've grown up. I don't think I need to make noise on something just because I don't think it's right. I can do it in a different way, in a more diplomatic way. I can say it to somebody without disrespecting them. It's the way you talk to people. That's why it's so important to understand the background of a character and how he addresses another character. The audience grasps that. And so meditation and doing it every day for about 40 minutes gives me great insight, because when I come out of it, I've gone through all the things that are anxiety ridden sometimes, when you're waiting for things, or developing something, or you're stuck, or a relationship is not working. I'm actually able to see it in my subconscious. And so when I do see it, and I can see the flaws in it of myself, what I still haven't understood in life, where my ignorance or my ego is tripping me, instead of me coming from my core, which has all the answers I need. So I tap into that resource that I built through the years. I was going to say through the centuries, but through the years. And out of that comes insight. And so when I speak now, I have a different tone. I snap quickly sometimes, and not because I want things to be my way. It's because I don't like noise. I don't like when people scream or talk loudly. I don't think it's necessary. The thing you learn as an actor is you don't have to scream to make a point. You can address somebody across the table without being loud. So that's come out of meditation.
Love it. Thaao, this was so delightful. Such a pleasure to meet you.
Oh, thank you. Nice to talk to you too.
Thank you for doing this. I hope everyone, please check out Lost Treasures, available where on your favorite podcast app, and let them know what you think of it.
Yeah, they're great stories because they really deal with what came before us. And the stories that have sustained through the centuries, and having gone through them, walked through them, sat with them, explored them, they have something to say. And so It's only taken me 20 years, but it's
I
enjoyable.
can't wait to see what's next.
And I'd
Thank
like
you.
to say one message to a friend of mine who's out there, who's had a bit of an obstacle right now in her life. Jan Redner, I'd like to say, please get well. I send you my love, and we miss you.
Thank you, Thaao. Have a great weekend. Such a pleasure.
Thank you. You too. I enjoy. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us again. You can find Lost Treasures on your favorite podcast app. Please join me next Wednesday, June 12th, when Little House on the Prairie's Dean Butler, who played Almanzo, joins me live to discuss his new memoir, Prairie Man, My Little House, Life and Beyond. The memoir is out June 25th, and you can pre-order it now. If you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, you can do so down below. Turn on the notifications for reminders of all upcoming shows. And if you'd like to stream audio versions, search The Locher Room on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget, the Daytime Emmy Awards are tomorrow night on CBS at 8 p.m. Eastern. Have a great weekend, everybody, and please, please stay safe.